Roger, excuse me.
5 years ago today, the government faced one of the biggest financial crises in history.
It was incredible. You can hear wave after wave of selling hitting the market.
It was a day when the Bank of England lost billions and speculators made fortunes.
It was in excess of $1 billion of profits.
Everyone else, 15%!
A day of disaster from which the government never recovered.
It was quite clear the government was not in charge of events.
I had no doubt we were in the middle of quite the biggest political crisis that I could remember.
Margaret Thatcher put Britain on the road to Black Wednesday. The economy was in crisis, and in her own party, the knives were out for the Prime Minister. Her Chancellor, John Major, suggested a rescue plan. He believed joining the European exchange rate mechanism would be both good for her and the economy. Margaret Thatcher detested the idea of putting the pound into Europe, but most Tory MPs supported it, and she knew years of division had to end.
There had been some pretty heated discussions back in 1985, 1986. I remember one famous occasion ending in discord in the cabinet room with Geoffrey Howe storming out and slamming the door, possibly the most decisive thing he ever did. So feelings ran pretty high for a long time. John Major took it all down. He managed to gently persuade her that it was probably right for the economy. There were strong domestic political reasons to do it. And so, rather like water dripping on a stone, it eventually became not too painful a decision for her to take.
It would be a revolution. The pound's value would be locked against the German Deutschmark and other European currencies. It could vary, but only a little. To maintain the pound's value, British interest rates had to match German ones. In theory, the pound would then be stable, equally attractive to investors. Whatever the Germans did to their interest rates, we would have to do the same. The hope, German discipline would give Britain a stable pound, low inflation, and German-style prosperity. It was a high-risk strategy. Nevertheless, Margaret Thatcher called in her Chancellor and the highest officials. She decided Britain would join the ERM the very next day. The hope was it would boost the Prime Minister's popularity before the Tory party conference in 3 days' time. This meant going in at the level the pound stood against the Deutschmark then, which was high. Despite the ERM rules, the Prime Minister took the decision without negotiation.
Although she was the one who let us in, she did it against her better judgment. And with a bit of defiance, there was no nonsense about consulting the Europeans. We did it, and we alone did it.
John Major called me and said, we have decided to join at a rate of 2.95 D-marks. And I said, John, I have to tell you, we have to negotiate that. And I think 2.95 is a little bit on the high side. And he said, no, we cannot change that because it was decided by the Prime Minister. And I said, well, I don't care about your Prime Minister, but I wanted to negotiate that with you. You have to follow the rules. But he said, well, it's too late, we will announce it in half an hour. And after it was announced, of course, there was no room for negotiations anymore. And we simply had to accept it and to pray and to hope that this was a realistic rate.
For John Major, Britain's entry was a triumph. From the start, this was his policy, and he took the credit.
I think everyone's very pleased that sterling has joined the exchange rate mechanism. I'm very pleased. We've been waiting for this decision for a long time. It's now been made. I think it will be a great success, and I'm looking forward to discussing it with my colleagues.
Are you a consultant, Mr. Major?
And I have nothing more to say about it at the moment.
But joining the ERM was not enough to save Mrs. Thatcher. The victim of a Tory party coup, just 7 weeks later, she left Downing Street for the last time.
Now it's time for a new chapter to open, and I wish John Major all the luck in the world.
But joining the ERM failed to bring instant prosperity. Britain had already been sliding into recession. Over the next 18 months, it got much worse. 1 million people lost their jobs. The high exchange rate of the pound, locked inside the ERM, meant businesses struggled to sell their goods abroad. The ERM reduced inflation, but there was little sign of German-style wealth.
People were finding it very hard to meet their mortgage payments, and when they failed to meet their mortgage payments and were obliged to sell their house, we were, for the first time in British post-war history, witnessing people selling houses for less than they'd paid. And that dreadful new word, negative equity, came into the language. It was a very, very hard time.
Against the odds, John Major won the 1992 election. He was determined to run the country as before, with the pound locked at the high exchange rate at which it had entered the ERM. He believed if he stood firm, the ERM could make the British economy as successful as Germany's.
The Prime Minister said he would come to dinner because the Sunday Times had supported him in the election. He said, you know, Andrew, Prime Ministers have tried to get inflation down and make Britain a low inflation economy. They've never succeeded. I'm going to do it. I'm going to be the Prime Minister that got inflation down and established Britain as a low inflation economy. To which one of our numbers said, yes, but this could be the low inflation of the dead. What's the point of having low inflation if the economy is not just on its knees, but on its back? Anybody can do that.
An angry Prime Minister said that this was a policy on which he would never give way. The pain was worth it.
He thumped the table and said, Andrew, don't you understand? There is no alternative.
Your horse is the only horse that matters. And if it's beaten within a length of the winner, we'll give you a free bet back. Beaten by a length. Available every day of the flat season with Coral.
But the Germans were about to increase the pain. The men who ran Germany's central bank prepared to meet. It wasn't politicians, but the Bundesbank Council who set Germany's interest rates. Whatever they decided, Britain would have to follow. But in Germany, the unthinkable was happening. The economy was faltering. The cost of unification with East Germany was higher than predicted, and inflation was rising. The Bundesbank Council raised interest rates.
Our decisions were made on the basis of what is necessary at home. Our primary target in that time was to go on in fighting the acceleration of price increases in our country. This is the Bundesbank's main target.
Inside the ERM, we should in theory have followed Germany's rising interest rates to keep the value of the pound steady. But the British government desperately tried to avoid doing this.
Did you put $10 billion at risk or not?
Yes.
Now, was that all profit or was that principal?
Well, it was our principal, but it was not all at risk, because the most we could have lost would have been, let's say, 2-3%, because there was no. It was a high reward, low risk bet.
Right.
But if it had gone wrong, we would have had the transaction cost of undoing it. Right. Whereas if we got it right, we made something like 15-20%. So we did put all our equity at risk, but it wasn't, it wasn't really very much of an
risking 10 billion. You were risking a billion or
less, even less.
Even less.
No,
even
substantially less.
Yeah.
We made a billion, but we made more than a billion actually. But we could have lost a few hundred million, which would have been perfectly acceptable.